The small house on Maplewood Street, once a suburban refuge, now seemed enveloped in a thick, oppressive mist of silence. The morning sun, which used to kiss the kitchen tiles with a welcoming warmth, appeared unable to penetrate the icy atmosphere that had settled since 4-year-old Anna's declaration, "Daddy is under the kitchen floor." The girl's voice, an almost inaudible whisper, carried a truth so brutal that it froze the air in the precinct. Chief Mark Rivers, a man forged by years of investigation, felt a shiver run down his spine. He looked at Francis Davis, the neighbor who had brought Anna to report the disappearance of Julian Grant, Martha's husband. Francis's face was pale, a mixture of fear and despair. "The girl, she said something strange. You need to hear this," Francis had pleaded, her voice urgent. Mark leaned in, his expression softening as he addressed the child. "What's your name, sweetie?" "I'm Anna," the girl replied, her large dark eyes trembling slightly. "Do you know where your daddy went?" he asked gently. Anna's answer, delivered with the cruel innocence of childhood, would detonate a series of events that would unravel a heinous crime. "Daddy is under the kitchen floor, where the tiles are a lighter color. Daddy is very cold and scary." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the muffled cough of a young officer trying to disguise a shiver. Mark immediately signaled Lieutenant Richard Monroe. "Monroe, call Martha Grant. I want her to come to the station and put together a preliminary investigation team. I want that scene checked in less than 30 minutes." Martha Grant arrived at the precinct more composed than Mark expected. Her eyes were dry, and her demeanor, though tired, showed none of the panic or sadness one would expect from a wife whose husband had disappeared. She wore an impeccable white blouse and black trousers, her hair neatly arranged, a mask of normalcy that contrasted with the silent anguish that preceded her. "I've already told you," Martha declared calmly. "My husband Julian has a habit of disappearing for a few days without warning. It's not the first time." Mark watched her intently without looking away. "You didn't find anything abnormal this time?" he asked. Martha shrugged. "No, I figured he'd come back like he always does." Richard, who was standing next to Mark, interjected. "But the neighbors said they heard arguments and things breaking that night." Martha glared at him, letting out an exasperated sigh. "We had an argument, but who doesn't argue in a marriage?" Mark nodded, the calm in his tone unwavering. "And you recently redid the kitchen floor?" There was a small, almost imperceptible pause before Martha replied. "I redid the floor because there was mold. I did it myself." Mark's surprise was evident. "You redid the tile yourself?" "Yes," Martha replied quickly, almost with excessive readiness. "I watched online tutorials." Richard pulled out a flash drive, his eyes fixed on Martha. "Your neighbor, Mr. Ernest Morgan, has a security camera. He provided us with footage showing you carrying Anna out of the house around 3 a.m. and returning alone with a bag of construction materials. Would you like to explain, Martha?" Martha bit her lip, the tension increasing in her jaw. "I didn't want Anna to breathe the mold. I took her to a friend's house. As for the materials, I wanted to fix the house myself." Mark raised an eyebrow, his blue eyes scrutinizing. "No receipt for the materials, no contractor, no official repair notice. And the girl says her father is under the kitchen tiles. What a coincidence." Martha clenched her fists, her voice rising a notch. "Are you accusing me of killing my husband?" Mark replied calmly, his voice firm and unwavering. "We're not accusing anyone. We're asking questions, and your answers don't seem to align." Martha, in a fit of frustration, suddenly turned to Richard. "You're an investigator, but do you know anything about an unhappy marriage? Did you know Julian used to hit me?" Mark cut her off. "Do you have any proof? Medical records, hospital visits, police reports?" Martha remained silent for a few seconds, then exhaled sharply. "I didn't go to the hospital, I just endured it." Richard tilted his head slightly towards Mark and whispered, "We need an emergency search warrant. The smell of cement is still fresh." Mark nodded. "Start the paperwork. I want forensics there first thing in the morning." The next morning, police converged on the small house at the end of Maplewood Street. Lisa Parker, the lead forensic officer, a cold but experienced and professional woman, knelt and sniffed the newly laid tiles. "The cement still smells fresh, it's not completely dry. There's something underneath," she declared, turning to another technician. "Begin drilling in the area with color discrepancy." Martha was kept in the living room, guarded by 2 officers. Anna was not present. Francis had taken her to her grandparents' house, as requested by Mark. Lisa supervised the drilling, layer by layer, starting with the lighter-colored tiles. The sound of the drill echoed through the heavy air. About 30 minutes later, the first layer of tiles was removed. Beneath the grey mortar, a piece of dark fabric began to appear. Lisa stopped the technician. Slowly, use your hands for the rest. Wearing gloves, they gently cleared away the cement. A young officer gasped. "Oh my God!" A human foot emerged, pale blue and rigid. Mark stepped forward, watching in silence for a few moments, before turning to Martha. "What would you like to say, Martha?" Martha did not respond. She turned her face away, the mask of calm finally beginning to crumble, revealing an alarming coldness. Lisa's voice was grim. Male body, fully wrapped in fabric, dried blood on the head, blunt force trauma. Richard snapped photos of the scene, then crouched to pick up a small broken object next to the body. "It's a broken phone, but we might be able to recover data." Mark narrowed his eyes. "Do it. Send it to another technician." An officer rushed outside and vomited. Lisa did not comment. "Not everyone is made for death," she said, her voice monotone. Mark looked at the body, its eyes still open, its fists clenched, as if it had fought until its last breath. He turned and looked at the silent house, the curtains swaying in the light breeze. "This is not a disappearance, this is not an accident. This is premeditated murder," he declared, turning to Richard. "Arrest Martha Grant and hold her in custody. Section 142. Suspicion of murder and body disposal." Richard stepped forward and read her rights. "Ms. Martha Grant, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder. You have the right to remain silent." Martha scoffed bitterly. "Do you know how many years I've lived in silence?" Mark replied clearly, "Well, no one else needs silence." The clinking of handcuffs echoed through the cement-dusted room. Martha did not resist. She merely looked at the now removed tiles, where her husband's body had just been discovered, her gaze empty as if she had nothing left to cling to. On the ride back to the detention center, Richard looked in the rearview mirror. Martha was as still as a statue. He thought to himself, some commit crimes in a fit of rage, but others, like Martha, seem to have orchestrated a tragedy. Back at the station, Mark called an emergency meeting. Present were the forensics team, data recovery technicians, and prosecutor Rose Martin, a sharp woman with eyes like blades. Lisa Parker spoke first. The victim, Julian Grant, died from blunt force trauma to the back of the head. No signs of defensive wounds. No blood at the burial site indicating the body was moved before being buried. Mark nodded. Clearly premeditated murder. Rose crossed her hands. But for a solid accusation, we need all the pieces of the puzzle. Motive, timeline, physical evidence. The girl Anna is the key, but a child's words are not enough. We need more. A young tech officer, Stephen Harris, stood up and presented the data recovered from the broken phone. Most of the memory is gone, but some text survived before it shut down. He projected the messages onto the screen, a chain of texts between Julian and Martha. Julian, Martha, I can't do this anymore. I'm filing for divorce next week. Martha, if you leave me, I'll make you disappear. Julian, don't be crazy. Think about Anna. Martha, Anna will be fine without you. She and I will live better. A heavy silence fell over the room. Rose frowned. This is enough to prove motive. Mark signaled Richard to send the investigative team back to Martha's house. Look for property documents, loan documents, anything that shows financial motivation. 2 hours later, Richard returned with a box of documents. He pulled out a stack. This is the property deed. Julian was the sole owner. We found evidence that Martha was trying to transfer the property, claiming he was missing. He took out another bundle. These are receipts for loans totaling almost $240,000, borrowed from Julian under the guise of a small personal business investment. No repayment has been made. Mark looked at Rose. Add financial motive to the threat at the scene. This is more than enough. We're not done yet, Richard added. We discovered frequent private messages between Martha and a man named Samuel Brooks on social media. Mark slammed the table. I want to talk to that man. That afternoon, Samuel Brooks, a tall man with slicked back hair and a dark shirt, was brought into the interrogation room. He seemed nervous, his eyes darting around. How do you know Martha Grant? Rose asked directly. Samuel swallowed hard. We met in an investment group. We talked online, met a few times. Were you romantically involved with her? Mark asked. Samuel hesitated. I had feelings, but nothing improper happened. She always said her husband was terrible and that she was tired of being controlled. Did she ever talk about hurting him? Richard asked. Samuel took a deep breath. Once she said, "I wish he would just disappear, but I thought it was just venting." Rose repeated the words. "Do you think Martha is impulsive?" Samuel remained silent. "No, she's more calculating than I thought." Meanwhile, at Carol Julian's mother's house, little Anna was sitting by the window, drawing. Carol placed a glass of milk beside her. "What are you drawing, sweetie?" she asked gently. Anna pointed to the paper, a human figure lying under a tiled floor, surrounded by stacked tiles. "It's Daddy. He's down there." Carol gripped the edge of the table, her voice trembling. "Who told you about that?" "I heard," Anna said, still focused on her drawing. "Mommy had a big pot. Daddy said no, and she hit him hard. Then Daddy stopped talking." Carol shuddered, trying to remain calm. "And then what did Mommy say?" "Don't tell anyone. If you do, our family will fall apart." Carol buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her face. In the interrogation room, Rose concluded, "Martha not only killed someone, she staged a fake home repair and created a false alibi by removing the child and instructing the girl to silence, which makes this crime even more severe." Mark nodded. "I recommend charges of premeditated murder, concealment of a body, and manipulation of a minor so that he does not testify. She should face all the consequences," Richard added. "Not only for Julian, but for Anna. This child has lived in lies and violence since she was 4 years old." Rose looked at her watch. "Prepare for the preliminary hearing. I want all the evidence organized. And remember, Anna's words may not be admissible as formal testimony, but they are the emotional safety pin." Mark, raising his somber voice, said, "We are not just seeking justice for the dead. We are trying to save a living soul, one already scarred." On the way back to Carol's house, Francis asked softly, "Do you think Anna truly understands everything?" Carol shook her head, her eyes red. "She's just a child, but the saddest thing is when a child understands too much and no one lets her speak." Francis choked up. "I've never seen a child so calm and at the same time so full of pain. When Anna said, 'Daddy is cold,' I got goosebumps." Carol squeezed Francis's hand. "I will protect that child no matter what." That night, Mark reviewed the case file. He opened a photo of Anna drawing at the window. Her face was strangely serious for her age. He sighed. "Some people bury a body after killing," he muttered. "Some bury their children's entire childhood." He looked out the station window, the faint glow of the night spreading over Maplewood Street. Tomorrow the case would officially move to prosecution. The cement had dried, but the blood would never disappear. The next morning, under the cold, biting light of the Illinois suburban sun, the forensic team and tactical police gathered around the house at 17 Maplewood Street. Once a quiet residence, the house was now surrounded by yellow tape, curious neighbors whispering from behind curtains, and a line of service vehicles parked along the narrow street. Lisa Parker, the chief forensic investigator, adjusted her rubber gloves, her steel eyes examining the kitchen floor. She signaled 2 team members to begin drilling the newly tiled area. Part of the floor had been examined the day before, but this time they would demolish the entire 40 centimeters thick cement base at the exact spot Anna had pointed to. The saw ground loudly, hailing broken tiles into shards. A pungent, harsh odor began to rise from beneath, thickening the air. Detective Richard Monroe wrinkled his nose and stepped back. "Smell of decomposition," Lisa confirmed, her voice still firm. "Everyone back. Hazmat team move in." Forensic technologist Thomas Daniels slid a crowbar into the cement edge. In 10 minutes, damp earth began to appear. "Carefully," Lisa warned. "We have signs of a buried object. Dig by hand." The scratching of small shovels echoed in the silence. Layer by layer, the fine dirt was lifted. Sweat streamed down Thomas's face, though it was only about 18 degrees 6 inside the house. Suddenly he froze, his hand trembling. "Something's here. I've touched fabric." Lisa immediately leaned in, illuminating the soil with her flashlight. "Stop. Carefully clear the dirt around it." Everyone seemed to hold their breath. After almost 10 minutes of careful digging, the edge of a large burlap sack appeared. It was dark, crumpled, and stained with deep red patches that resembled dried blood. Richard stepped back and reached out, instinctively resting his hand on his holstered weapon, though he knew nothing alive remained under that earth. "Take a tissue sample," "Open the bag," Lisa said in a low but firm voice. When the zipper was opened, a wave of putrid air exploded. Thomas turned and vomited violently in the corner of the kitchen. Another officer clapped a hand over his mouth, his face pale. Inside the bag, a man's body lay crumpled, tightly forced into the narrow space. His head was drenched in dried blood with a deep indentation on his temple, clear signs of a blunt object impact. Mark entered, stopping dead at the sight of the victim's face, distorted by decomposition, but still unmistakable. Julian Grant. The girl was right. Richard stepped forward with a trembling hand as he took photos of the scene, fighting back nausea. Lisa pulled out a small bag next to the body. More evidence. A broken phone. "Send it to tech, recover everything," Mark ordered, his eyes fixed on the corpse. Lisa nodded. "The body has been dead for at least 72 hours. No containment. Fatal blow to the head, consistent with a sudden strike from behind. Blood smeared on the back and collar indicates he was attacked while standing, then fell and was bagged." Richard made notes. Julian never had a chance to fight. "Death was quick," Lisa added. "No defensive wounds on the hands. Left hand still clenched, likely a final reflex before losing consciousness." Another forensic technician, James Morgan, silently removed the rest of the burlap. He shuddered at the sight of a digital watch still clamped to the cadaver's wrist. The screen was cracked, but the hands were frozen at 2:42 a.m. "Could be the time of death," Lisa whispered. "Matches Martha's footage leaving the house with Anna." Mark turned to Richard. "Call Rose. Tell her to prepare the indictment file. At this point, it's a clear-cut case of murder. There's nothing left to debate." At the detention center, Martha Grant sat on a narrow metal cot, her eyes empty as she stared out the small barred window. When the door opened, Rose Martin entered, holding a thick file. "Do you have anything to say?" Rose asked bluntly. "No," Martha replied hollowly. "We excavated the kitchen floor. Julian's body was there. A dark fabric bag. The blood, the blow, a broken phone, a watch that stopped at the moment you took your daughter out. Nothing to add?" Martha gave a faint, bitter smile. "I guess you're happy to be right." Rose leaned forward. "I don't need to be right. I need the truth. And you need to decide if you're a murderer or a victim." Martha didn't respond. She stood up and began pacing slowly back and forth in her cell. Without turning, she said, "Julian said he was leaving me. He said he would take Anna. I couldn't let that happen." Rose narrowed her eyes. "Are you admitting you killed your husband?" Martha remained silent. "You planned everything, pretending to take your daughter away as an alibi, buying materials to redo the same floor that night. This wasn't rage, it was calculated." "He drove me crazy," Martha whispered. "I felt like a ghost. If I hadn't struck first, I would have—" Rose's voice faded and grew cold. "You could have divorced him. You could have reported him. But instead you chose murder and buried him under the same floor where your daughter plays every day." Martha clenched her fists, her voice sharp. "I don't regret it." In the digital forensics room, technician Stephen Harris sat at the computer, his eyes fixed on the screen. A small video clip had just been extracted from the damaged phone. Only 38 seconds long, but it was invaluable evidence. Mark and Richard stood behind him. The screen displayed night footage, apparently from an internal camera placed high in the kitchen corner. In the video, Julian stood facing Martha, holding a small suitcase. "Martha, I'm leaving. My lawyer will contact you in the morning," he said clearly. "You're not going anywhere," Martha replied in a low voice. "I don't want Anna to see this. Don't make things worse." Julian turned, and Martha grabbed an object that appeared to be a cast-iron skillet and rushed toward him from behind. The video stopped at that exact moment. Stephen's voice trembled. "That's it. This is the entire clip." Mark clenched his fists. "We have everything we need. Now we wait for the trial." That night, Carol held Anna in her arms. The child had fallen asleep after a nightmare, her hair drenched in cold sweat. Carol whispered, "Your father will have his voice heard, and you will live as a child again, not as a witness to a crime." Outside, the rain began to fall, light but cold. And under the removed floor tiles, the kitchen was now empty, but the memory of death remained soaked in every tile, every grout seam, like the last breath of a betrayed man. The official preliminary hearing took place in the Illinois State Regional Court. The air was so heavy it seemed to suffocate. Martha Grant was brought in, wearing a gray prison uniform. Her hair was no longer neatly combed as on the first day. Her eyes still held a trace of defiance, but also revealed fatigue and tension. On the opposite side was Prosecutor Rose Martin, her face sharp and cold as ever. Beside her were Detective Mark Rivers and Investigator Richard Monroe. In the public benches, Carol, the victim Julian's mother, sat calmly, holding the hand of her granddaughter Anna, who sat obediently beside her. Rose began calmly. "Mrs. Martha, today we are giving you the opportunity to declare the full truth about this. It is your last chance to explain your actions, if the evidence is not sufficient to proceed with a first-degree murder charge." Martha gave a bitter smile. "The truth? Since when do those in handcuffs have the privilege of telling their side of the story?" Mark replied coldly. "Since the moment you picked up a cast-iron skillet and ended your husband's life. Since you turned your kitchen into a tomb for the man your daughter called father." Martha looked at Carol and Anna. Her eyes flickered for a moment, but quickly returned to a steady calm. "Julian wasn't the saint you all think he was." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Martha licked her lips and then began to speak, each word measured and emotionless. "When we got married, Julian was kind, but then he changed and started controlling me, questioning every text, every social interaction. I quit my job at the cosmetics store because he said I dressed too provocatively. So I cut off friends because he said they were bad influences." Mark interrupted. "Do you have any medical records, evidence of psychological or physical abuse?" "No," Martha replied immediately, "because I never thought of reporting the man I once shared a bed with. I thought I could endure it for Anna's sake." Rose raised her hand. "But according to Julian's therapist's notes, Dr. Fred Sanders, you were the one exhibiting controlling behavior. He wrote, 'Julian shows signs of distress from living with an impulsive, manipulative, and depression-prone wife.'" "He made that up," Martha said through clenched teeth. "So, what do you say about your messages to your ex-best friend, Laura Mitchell?" Rose read aloud. "If Julian leaves me, I'll make sure he never leaves anyone else. There's a way to silence someone forever, if you stay cold enough." Martha clenched her fists. "I was just venting." Mark stood still, placing a piece of evidence on the table. This wasn't just venting. He pulled out the cast-iron skillet with dried blood on the edge. "The blood matches Julian's DNA. This is the murder weapon. It's not a message." Martha lowered her head, but then she looked up, her voice dropping. "Why don't you mention that Julian filed for divorce, that he was trying to take my custody of Anna, that he wanted to kick me out of the house I helped build? What did you expect me to do?" Richard snapped. "No one forced you to kill. There are laws." "Where were those laws when I cried every night?" Martha whispered. "Where were they when I begged him not to throw me out like trash?" Rose spoke slowly. "No one denies the pain. But no amount of pain justifies burying a body under the kitchen floor." After the confrontation, the investigative team expanded its scope to Martha's personal relationships. Mark called Laura Mitchell, Martha's ex-best friend, to clarify the threatening messages. Laura, a thin woman with curly hair and a distant voice, seemed hesitant at first. "We were close," she said. "Martha had a tendency to demand attention. She got furious quickly." "Do you remember anything she said about Julian?" Richard asked. Laura thought for a moment. "Once she told me, 'I hate the way he looks at that girl, like she's all his. If I lose Anna, I'll have nothing left.' I thought it was just jealousy." Rose asked, "Do you think Martha is capable of killing?" Laura was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. "I don't want to believe it, but when I heard Julian had disappeared, I wasn't surprised. I saw that look in her eyes. It wasn't the look of someone sad. It was the look of someone who had made a decision." That night at Carol's house, Anna was playing with building blocks. She arranged small bricks into a square shape, placing a plastic figure in the middle. Carol sat quietly, watching her granddaughter. "What are you doing, Anna?" "I'm building a bed for Daddy," the child replied, "like the one we had in our house." Carol shuddered. "Daddy's not there anymore, honey. He's in a better place now." "No, he's not," Anna shook her head. "He's still cold. I saw him shivering in my dream." Carol hugged her tight. "Daddy loved you very much, but now he needs you to be strong. He'll be happy if you're safe and loved." Anna looked at her grandmother, her voice soft as the wind. "So Mommy loves me." Carol stifled a sob. "Your mother did something very wrong. But you are not wrong, Anna. You are just a child, and you will be protected."